Leadership on the Rocks listeners, you're the best. What can I say? You're the ones going above and beyond to grow yourself as a leader. Your organization will give you the title, the pay, and the to-do list, but they won't necessarily equip you to lead. But you are here putting in the time to grow yourself as a leader, and I applaud you for that because that's what essential leaders do. They're never done learning, they're never done growing. So if you're ready to take your leadership to the next level through online courses, personalized coaching, or corporate training, such as workshops, then please go to leadershipontherocks.com and choose your growth plan. You can also click to schedule a free 30-minute discovery call with me so we can talk about your leadership journey or your leadership professional development at your organization. So again, just go to leadershipontherocks.com and choose the appropriate button for your growth and development. Keep listening and keep spreading the word about this podcast, and I hope to work with you soon. Now back to the show. Well, Leadership on the Rocks community, here we are. We're another year older, a little wiser, hopefully, have a little bit more gray in my hair, and we're still sipping on our favorite blend of leadership wisdom on the rocks. Y'all, I can hardly believe it. It is the end of season 3 of Leadership on the Rocks podcast. It's been 3 years. My mind is blown. 3 seasons of lessons learned, stories shared, and those aha moments that remind us why we're on this journey of growth and leadership to begin with. You know, in the daily whirlwind of meetings, emails, and that third cup of coffee that you didn't even taste just because you're trying to chug it to have enough energy to keep going. Come on, you've been there. It's easy to let life's sand, chafe you, get in all those nooks and crannies that really kind of rub you raw, and it will truly bury what matters. And that's why we're here. We're here to keep building our life and our leadership on the essential rocks, what matters most, instead of those shifting sands that are so susceptible to the winds and waves of trends. And a lot of times the sand elements are really unurgent, unimportant, and yet we let them get in the way. So as we close out this season of the year, let's take a moment to reflect. I've curated some standout moments from season 3, some of those mic drop insights, powerful stories, and a lot of those actionable tips that make us better leaders. And so it's almost like the greatest hits album for the leadership playlist. So grab your metaphorical or actual cocktail and sit back and enjoy this season's highlight reel. Let's celebrate how far we've come and get fired up for where we're headed. To start off season 3, I had my absolute favorite guest, and honestly, the one I love the most. How can I say that? It was because my guest was my husband, Jason Reese, and we talk about everything when it comes to leadership in marriage and in parenting in episodes 56 and 57. So enjoy our conversation. You have so many quips. Sarcasm is your love language. I agree. And I've learned to speak it now. I'm no longer offended. But
Most of the time.
You would say, forget being on the same page. What would you say?
Oh, yeah. So as a parent, right, be on the same page. Forget that. Can we just get in the same book? That would be great. I'm just happy to be in the same book with you. Just big picture, big concept. You use big rocks, right? So getting those big rocks, those principles, let's get that right. Mm-hmm. We'll eventually get on the same page.
Yes, absolutely. So think about what you've learned in this podcast and anywhere else that you've been reading or listening to, communication, and work to apply those principles in your marriage. But let's talk about communication in our marriage. And I want to say at first, I did not know how to communicate at all. In our early marriage, I was the whole, I'm going to whimper. And I want him to play the game and ask me what's wrong. And then I'm going to say nothing. And then I want him to ask again, what's wrong? And then I'm going to say yet again, nothing. And then I want him to say, oh, honey, come here. It's okay. And hug me and do all these things. And I never actually communicated what I was thinking or feeling. And that's one of the first lessons I learned is, Bethany, talk. Tell him what's on your mind. He cannot read your mind, girl.
Yeah. And probably won't try very hard to dig into it, right? It's like, hey, are you okay? Yeah. No, everything's great. Oh, fine. And then off I go to do whatever it was on my mind, whatever task that was. And I just moved on. Totally.
Which ticked me off, by the way.
Totally missed the point, right? It's like, oh, she is not happy. Regardless of what she said, pay attention, like signals.
Yes.
Yeah. Three Big Questions, Patrick Lencioni, like great leadership guru, and bled that over into the family. You talked about that earlier with the principles, right? They bleed over, right?
Yeah.
It's not just a business one, it's family, it's faith, it's your relationship with your spouse. Those big principles stay true across the board.
Absolutely.
That's another great one.
So the book was called The Three Big Questions for a Frantic Family, and it's a leadership fable. So he wrote it in a fable style, and it's really, really great. And essentially what you have, anybody can picture this, is you have a husband and wife with small kids, and their life is just chaos, right? It's just constant chaos. They're both trying to do a career. Their kids are running wild. And here's the essence of the book is the most important organization you will ever lead is your family. And yet we don't often take time to be intentional in leading our family. We just let things happen. Like we show up at work and we have a plan and we have a goal and we have a vision and we have a structure, systems and processes. And we know who we are and what we're doing at work. But then we come home and it's just the opposite. There is no structure. There is no vision, mission, core values of who we are and why we do things the way that we do. And so Lencioni really hits home on, again, the most important organization you will ever lead is your family. While we may not have been in the same book or started out that way, we really quickly came to the conclusion that we got to have a conversation and we have got to take a stand and be a united partnership and a united front. So these kids don't run our house. And we picked a couple of different categories. So can you run us through the categories of what we absolutely had to agree on in our parenting?
Yeah, so you started with one, right? Food. Beth has this sign in the kitchen that's like, you eat what's cooked, or there's only one meal. Something. It's the sign. It's in there.
Yeah.
Again,
one meal, take it or leave it.
That's right. So you eat what's cooked, right? So dinner was prepared. We're all sitting down at the table as a family, and you will eat it, right? We're not going back to find something else. So check and adjust, kids.
Eat what is prepared or go to bed hungry. You will be fine.
Another big one's always been technology, right? Is how do you balance that? And that, again, back to the table of you don't bring it to the table. You're not interacting with it. Discipline is another one, right? Of how do you discipline your kids? What's appropriate? That's a big one. And then the kid activities. So what are they going to be involved in, to what level, right? And how does it, either infringe on your lifestyle or not? And that's a personal choice that each family has to make, right? But
in episode 58, Jen Weaver shares with us how to develop community to grow our leadership. She starts by encouraging us to stop disqualifying ourselves as leaders, which is very important, but then ends with helping us build relationships with those tough coworkers. And you know the ones I'm talking about.
And in a greater sense, and in a lot of ways, a more significant sense, I think a lot of us disqualify ourselves as leaders. And we find all sorts of reasons or believe all sorts of reasons why that has to be true. Well, I'm not really a leader because I'm not the owner of the company. I'm not really a ministry leader because I'm only volunteering in this capacity. I'm not really a leader because my area of leadership is in my home, or, well, I'm a shift leader or I'm a team leader, but that doesn't really mean that I'm a leader. I'd have to be a VP level to be a leader, or I'd have to be the one overseeing the school to be qualified as leadership here. And so when I'm talking about ministry leadership, I'm talking about you see what you do through the lens of caring for people. You see what you do as an expression of your faith. And I believe everything, if you're a Christian, then everything we do gets to be an expression of our faith. And so it doesn't matter what your official title is. It doesn't matter how many people you're caring for. It could be like you managing your desk and interacting with customers that are coming in. Well, you can lead in that capacity by how you show up, by how you steward yourself, by how you care for the people that you interact with.
For if you're on a team or in a group or work with people where their heart just seems to be hardened and they are stuck in that scarcity mindset, that competition, how do you kind of break down those walls?
So I think one of the greatest assets we have as leaders is how we lead ourselves. And so some of that can simply be in the way that you as the leader model to the rest of your team. And it could even be peer levels. Even, I'm going to say, Sometimes we lead up in this area as well, where we might be all right with our own teams, leading down to those that are on our teams or at a peer level, but we get to model up by how we navigate different things. And modeling over a sustained period of time that this is not a power play. This is not, I'm going to like pull one over on you. I'm going to dupe you into thinking I'm really for you, but I'm really vying for this thing for myself. But the consistency of showing up in ways, making space to champion one another.
In episode 59, Lyndon Pryor shares how we can discover purpose and make an impact. Now, he reminds us to see, value, and serve the whole person, not just part of the person. And then he also calls us to action to recognize our influence at the tables in which we sit and serve so that we can be a part of shifting that conversation.
Right? Like, so somebody might see your Christianity, but they ain't gonna see your womanness.
Yeah.
Or they may see,
we love those labels.
Right. Like, so, or they may see your class, but they don't want to see your race or, or whatever it is, right? Like, we want to pick and choose the parts of people that we actually value, and we'll serve those. We'll cater to those parts, but we will not. But we'll leave the others to the side as if they don't exist. And we've got to understand that we are dealing with whole people. And therefore, you are taking everybody, and we are called to then figure out ways to serve and respond to and respect and love and care for the whole person, all of you, not just the parts of you that I like or don't, or appreciate, but all of you. And it's difficult to do that, right? Like, I think that is a challenge to every single person. But
how would you encourage people to recognize that it doesn't matter your title, your paycheck, your industry, your profession, or whatever? You have influence and you are a leader. How would you encourage those?
Yeah, I was having this conversation somewhere recently, and I made the analogy that everybody sits at a table. And many of us sit at multiple tables, right? Like, so that might be at your job where you are a leader in title or whatever, or maybe you're just a member. But it also could be your household table, right? Like, it could be literally the literal table that you sit around every single day with your family or friends or whatever the case may be. But everybody sits at a table. And at that table, you have the opportunity to look around and see what things are missing. And by what things, I mean, what perspectives, what ideas, what opportunities are missing from that table and the way in which you all are doing whatever it is that you do on a daily basis. And because you are at the table, you have the opportunity to shift the conversation.
In episode 62, Rachel Baker tells us why creating breathing room in our leadership is so important. And she gives us a permission slip to stop living the hustle culture. Love this episode.
I think anyone in a leadership position, male or female, we absolutely wear all the hats. And so as I started thinking about that feeling of like, I'm just running on the hamster wheel, I can't get off, am I even making progress? You just feel like you go all day. Where did the day go? Did you get anything done? I don't know. My list was eternal. Did anything get crossed off? It's just all those things swirling in your head. And I could not put words to what it was I needed, other than like, I need a break. I need to stop.
You just described how I feel so often, and I'm sure everybody out there.
Yes. And so when you are in charge of others or leading others in any capacity, I don't care what field you're in, there is you as a person, there is your personal life and whatever roles you have in that. And then there's the work that you do if you're in ministry as well. Like, we just do so much, and we somehow think we can cram it all into a certain amount of time. And then if we work harder and we do more and we hustle, we'll get there somehow eventually. And I want to spread the word that false, lies, all of it, like none of that is true. And the thing that has helped me most is not hustling more or pushing harder or, trying to get through the hard stuff. It's stopping and taking a moment to breathe and rest. And because I love the illustration of, people talk about pouring into others, right?
Yes.
We pour into other people. And so just take that literally. Think of a pitcher full of water pouring into different cups. That's what we're doing all day. We're pouring into this person and that person. And if you're leading a team of people, you are trying to pour into all of those people so that they are pouring into their people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Eventually, if you don't stop and head over to the faucet or wherever it is you're getting water and refill that pitcher, you've got nothing left to pour. And you're just coming out of this empty space. You're trying like every last little drop. I know I've got one more to give, but you just really don't. And at that point, whatever you think you've got to give, nobody wants it.
Usually work and even lesser things like work email get in the way. So how do we actually make it a priority to create that space so that we can be filled?
Yes. Oh, that's such a good question. And I love the practical questions. Like, that's what I'm like, yes, let's go. I'm going to do some things. Because like you said, it's easy to say, this is what I value. This is my priority. But kind of like with money, you say, this is what's important to me. I want to give. I want to be generous. But if you actually sit and look at your bank statement or your credit card statement and see where your money is going, that really speaks more to what you value and what you prioritize in your life. So, if I sit down and look at my statements, I'm like, holy cow, with the Starbucks. And, we talk about, you mentioned my coffee addiction. Legit, I've got to scale that back. And I realize I'm not spending as much in the giving and generosity as I am on coffee, maybe, or books. I love books. Just with that in mind, where is your time going? If you say God is a top priority for you, or you need space for, meditating or stretching, whatever it is for you that kind of calms you and centers you, how much time are you actually putting there?
In episode 63, Counselor Raisha Clark, honestly, I'm going to call her our residential counselor and therapist for Leadership on the Rocks, but she gives us great advice and actionable steps on how to lead in the age of mental awareness. She starts off by telling us to be mindful, but then continues to tell us that we need to also provide clarity and structure. We feel the pressure to make everybody feel comfortable. But then again, sometimes in leadership, especially when you're having accountability conversations or clarifying expectations, it's very uncomfortable. So can you kind of walk us through that whole journey of just let's just start here. What is some psychology 101 that leaders need to know and understand when it comes to just serving people first, right? So what's some psychology 101 that we need to be aware of to better understand mental health, how it plays out in the workplace so that we can lead better?
Yeah. Well, I think one of the biggest things that I tell people is actually one of the 3 points I was going to tell you guys about today is mindful leaders really do practice mindfulness, meaning to me, my definition of mindfulness is quite simply what is going on and how is it making me feel? So a mindful leader in a moment having a conversation with an employee that feels kind of sticky, they're being mindful. Hey, how's this conversation impacting me right now? Like I'm feeling a little something. How's it impacting me? We have to check in with ourselves first as the leader in those conversations that might feel a little sticky. But that mindful leader, they don't have loose lips. You know that old expression, loose lips sink ships? I mean, that is so true. So when we have a leader that just they haven't thought through the moment that they're going to have with the client. Yeah, employers really need to be mindful of that when we get so liberal in how we want to run our organization, that we really just don't have very obvious parameters of how to accomplish the task we ask of you. It leaves people really anxious. It leaves employees really anxious on how to meet those standards and if they're good enough to meet it without the structure in place.
Man, you know what this reminds me of? I said this several times on the podcast. It reminds me of the difference between being nice and being kind, right? Nice is, doing whatever to save the person's feelings. And so you're just constantly pouring out yeses or not talking about the hard things because you don't want to hurt their feelings.
Yeah.
But when you're kind, it is, I care too much to not be clear, to not have boundaries, to not have structure, to not tell you whenever you need feedback, but also to tell you good things too. That's kind. And to me, that's just the summary of all of this when you're engaging is I love what you said, that businesses and leaders have gotten so, liberal, just loosey goosey with, you know what, everything kind of goes because I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings by having any kind of structure whatsoever. And it's actually worse for production and worse for our mental health because we don't know where we stand. I don't know what you expect of me. I don't know how to reach it. And I don't know when I'm doing a good job because there's no target. In episode 64, Stephanie Dogood talks all about the empowerment of women in leadership. And she starts by telling us the 3 biggest challenges that women face.
One of the biggest things that women have or have a challenge with is confidence, courage, and something called imposter syndrome.
Ooh.
And so
Can you say those again? Let me
sure
take those
can.
in again.
Confidence, courage,
Mm-hmm.
imposter syndrome.
Amen.
And they're all related. So you
Mhm.
really don't have one without the other, but
Yeah.
I'm going to start with the confidence piece. So a lot of times we have this voice in our head, and you probably have it as well. I know that I've had it, that, well, I'm not sure if I can do that, or I wonder what somebody is thinking when I make that decision, or I wonder what my coworker thought whenever I made that comment. We're always thinking and running through these stories in our head about what everybody else is thinking about us.
Mm-hmm.
And the reality is they're not.
That's so true.
And that's the hardest thing to do. You put something on social media and you're worried about, oh my gosh, I wonder what people are going to think. Am I going to get some likes? What kind of
Mhm.
comments are they going to have? Just you have to stop.
Yeah.
And it's hard to do that. You always wonder. But if you can say, I'm not going to think about that right now. Let me just focus on what my purpose and my passion is, and I'm going to move forward on my journey.
In episode 66, Pete Steinberg tells us the symptoms of leadership shock. And FYI, you've probably had it. I know I have. And he tells us how to overcome it. When I hear that word, leadership shock, yes. Oh my gosh. Yes, I felt all of that, everything about that word. So will you just explain what you mean by leadership shock? Because even in hearing that, I identify with it, even though I'm not 100% sure like what you mean by it yet.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting, and the term leadership shock really came to me as because I kept working with leaders that had the same symptoms. And their symptoms were their calendar was out of control. Like they had no time. They were working on the weekends. Their teams were confused. Most importantly, they just didn't feel like they were doing a good job. And so leadership shock is just like being in physical shock. Like your blood pumps, like you're breathing, but you can't actually do anything.
Now here, Pete reminds us that delegation doesn't mean no. It just means not me.
Because it's not no, it's not me. Right. So these
excellent.
things that come up isn't no. It's like, that is not where my priority is. It's not me. It's someone on my team. Right. So the things that are on someone's calendar when they have shock, it's not that they shouldn't be done. It's just the leader doesn't know if they should do it or not.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so I think it is, again, it's about giving space. Often they'll find themselves in meetings where actually, do they need to be in that meeting, or can someone on their team lead that meeting? Right. And I used to be in that meeting. I was in that meeting. I used to lead that meeting, and now I've been promoted. I still want to be in that meeting. That's what I know. That's what I'm good at. No. That's not you. Right. That's not you, leader. That's someone on your team gets that experience to run that meeting. You have to pull yourself out of that meeting. And so
I love the
think
distinction.
Yeah. So I think it goes back to that empowerment piece,
Mm-hmm.
which is, as you work your way up, there are fewer and fewer meetings that you should be in, and there's more and more delegation that you have to do.
Absolutely, because your scope has grown immensely.
Right.
Like it's exponential.
Right.
In episode 67, Kayla Yoder tells us the most absolute foundational rock that we need to build our life and leadership on, which is the rock of building a close relationship with God. how do I find you? I'm flipping through. I love the phone book analogy. It's so perfect. It's like, where's my 911 verse? Help me.
Yes.
Because praying scripture also is so impactful in our lives, and it's extremely impactful in our leadership. So I'm just so excited for you to tell us, how to read the Bible. But I want to start with why. Why is really spending time in God's word so important for our relationship with him and for our lives in leadership? Why is reading the Bible so important?
That is our main way to hear from him. Like, that is God's written word. Yes, he had men pen it, but those are his Holy Spirit inspired words, and they aren't just stories. They are true life accounts of how God helped people who were messy, who were just not obedient like we are at times. And it is basically a giant history book of how people handled things and how God rescued them. And it shows us the story of redemption from beginning to end of God's love for us. And as leaders, whether we're a leader in the home, a leader outside the home, this is kind of our guidebook. Like, everybody wants a how-to book. That's scripture. And getting into that helps us understand who God is. Why do I have to talk to people kindly when they just need the truth? Like, that's been my struggle lately. He's been like, okay, remember, your words are supposed to be like honey and sweet and healing and not quite so hard. Like, when we are seeking God's will, everybody wants to know, what's God's will for my life? Oh, God, tell me what your will is. You can't know his will unless you let yours go and you ask him what his will actually is. Like, let it go. Like, yes, you have plans, and he has given you ambitions. He has given you that desire to get in that position of leadership for a reason, but that reason is his, not yours. So whether it's promotion, whether it's you trying to provide for yourself, that's been a big struggle for me. Like, God, this is a great idea. You put this in my mind. I know this is you. And he's like, great. That's going to make you try and provide for yourself when I want to provide for you. Like, don't take my spot. That's my job. So really, just like when we want God's will, we want to know what he wants for us. Like, Lord, just give me your will. He's not going to give it to you in giant doses like he does him and who he is, because he knows you can't handle it. You can't handle the plan for 5 years down the road, let alone
So true.
an hour from now. Like, he's got to lead you crumb by crumb down the path, because we just can't handle it. So stop asking for that. Like, stop asking, what's my 5-year plan? What's my 10-year plan? God's like, nice try, not happening. Your plan for 5 minutes from now is to keep seeking me, because I'm going to lead you wherever you're going, and I'm going to give you the words in the moment, but you got to stick with me.
In episode 70, Simon Bailey tells us a wonderful parable about the friends hurry, worry, ready, and steady, and how they navigate resilience at work. You'll definitely want to hear this one. I love your new book. I've started reading it. Resilience at Work, How to Coach Yourself into the Thriving Future. And I just want to say, it's a parable. And your 4 characters crack me up. It's hurry, worry, steady, and ready.
What I recognize is that there are people who are listening to us right now. They are living life in a hurry. In fact, our research of Working America said that 56% of working Americans are living life in a hurry. They're not enjoying life as much as they should. 48% of working Americans are worried about the future. And what's interesting, research says that when the brain is worried, you actually slow down. You're not creating neurogenesis, which is the process of growing neurons, which grows the brain. Because worry has a BFF called stress and fear, that literally the gremlins of discouragement begin to speak into your life, and they slow down the human operating system, and the Holy Spirit is not able to flow through you as it should.
Why is resilience such an essential skill for us to have?
Because resilience invites you to discover you. Resilience invites you into a conversation to realize that in every season, everything you need to thrive is inside of you. But how do you get it out of you? So you go through the friend-to-friend process, which are 3 questions that were given to me with permission by Dr. Larry Kefauver, a licensed counselor, that he used this in his practice 40 years ago. And the first question that hurry and worry are invited to answer is, what do you want for you? And the reason that's so important, especially for leaders, is we're taking care of everyone else. But when we zoom out and say, what do I want for me? as I am serving, as I am giving, as I'm making a difference, that's where your real honesty starts. Mhm.
Yeah. And I don't think a lot of us can answer that question because we're programmed. This is just a generalization, but it feels like we're almost programmed to answer, I want the job, the title, the house, the car, the things of society, material things. But to peel away all of the layers of that onion to say, wait, what do I really want in life? I don't think a lot of us can answer that. That's something I've struggled with, deprogramming myself from what society says I should be. In episode 72, business coach Brittany Bruce tells us how the best practices of starting up a business actually applies to starting up your leadership. So think of a wheel, think of like a tire. The hub is Jesus. The hub is being connected to your faith, to the Lord, that's the hub, spiritual development, personal development, because if that is not on, nothing is going to work. Nothing is going to, the wheel will not spin if you don't have the hub. The outside, the tire, is the clarity, the vision, the knowing the knowing where you're going, who you're serving, all the things, the why behind what it is that you're doing. The spokes, we've got one spoke about branding, who you are and who you serve. The next one is product development. The next one is in the business world, what we call marketing. Or if you want to be in the leadership world, it's communicating. It's sharing the product and service that you've created and reminding them that this is going to solve their problems, their struggles. This is going to fulfill their desires. Because if you build it, they won't come. But if you build it and tell them about it, they will utilize the products and services. They will utilize what you have to offer. If you look at any successful leader or any successful business or any successful ministry, they got super clear on who they are and who they serve. And that is what's called branding. Branding is this fancy word that really, when we boil it down and we simplify it, it's not colors and fonts. That's what we go to first thing is, it must be colors McDonald's arches. I'm loving it.
Logos, right. And those are good. And those are, the visual branding, but branding to its core, it is who you are and who you serve. So if we can get super clear on our passions, our strengths, our giftings, our talents that we've received, not what we worked for, not, scripture says that we receive these talents and these gifts and these strengths from the time that we were conceived in our mother's womb. We were fearfully and wonderfully made. We were chosen and created, and he gifts us these things. If we can define that, if we can see that, if we can study that, and who we are called to serve. Because leadership isn't barking orders. It's not telling people what to do. Leadership is serving.
In episode 74, Tammy Alvarez shares with us how to escape the career trap. And it starts with being vulnerable and breaking the rules with collaborative problem solving. Give it a listen.
Is that when I finally admitted out loud what everyone knew? I was like, this is not my jam. I can get people inspired. I can set a strategy. I can get people to run into that burning building. But if you're going to ask me to figure out the square root of anything, this is not my thing. And so what my team did, I ended up surrounding myself with people who were really good at this, and I wasn't. I had quants and data analysts and data scientists and all these people that would help me understand the data before the big meeting. So I could ask my dumb questions, I could do what I need to do, and then go in and actually test and challenge like the leader I was known to be. And so I think being vulnerable and admitting the things that you're not good at help you reach out to those where that is their superpower. They become part of the solution. They get excited about whatever it is you're working on instead of worrying about cleaning up your mess when you're done. And so, that's something to think about in terms of being vulnerable.
Absolutely. And I think about the humility that goes with that. So often pride and arrogance of, I've got this in my own power versus the humility of saying, I don't have it all and I need help, and working together through that collaboration as a team. I think you're just debunking right here one of the biggest fears of leadership, like what you said, is the fear that I have to know everything about everything. And that's just a facade. Leaders, listen to everything Tammy is saying. You do not have to know everything about everything. That's why you have a team.
But I would find that, okay, there's one part of my business that was struggling. So it didn't matter whether I was in sales or middle office or in operations or risk. It didn't matter. There was a pain point. And when you looked at that pain point, it got ugly. It grew all these tentacles like spaghetti through the organization. And so you need the collective thought leadership of the organization to fix it. You can't stay in your bubble and make it go away. But when you realize that, oh, okay, I know I don't actually have the title to do this, but I have the leadership skills, the relationships, and the drive to get this done. And then you start to whisper in people's ear whose lives are as miserable as yours in the different departments. And you're like, how much is this like killing your team, right? It's killing my team too. What can we do about it? And then the two of you are like, oh, hang on a second. We need finance. Let's go talk to the guy in finance. And he's like, this is terrible. Great. Now I got 3 people on our team. Let's go talk to HR and legal and all the things. And so when you start to build this little fiefdom of people who are suffering, whose insights you desperately need, before you know it, you have got this coalition of change makers that are following your lead because everybody's voice is in it, their fingerprints are all over it, but you're the one that's willing to take the bullet first. But the bullet doesn't come, right?
Yeah.
And so that's what I talk about in terms of breaking the rules, is that we're like, oh, it's not my job. I don't want to step on my boss's toes. I don't want to like seem like I'm trying to land grab. Like we have all these things that we think about, and none of those are actually true.
In episode 75, Urs Koenig tells us about radical humility and why it's so important. And he tells us the difference between then leadership and now leadership. And honestly, we want to be a now leader. We're done with the then leadership. You were so spot on when you were talking about previous leadership of just top down and how we've got to make this shift in leadership with humility, focusing on relationships, talking about safe environments. This is a newer concept in the dawn of time of leadership. So now you have then leadership and you have now leadership. And our goal is to shift from then leadership to now leadership. So can you define those 2 points of leadership for us?
So then leadership is what you point out, heroic top-down leadership that has served, for, we can argue decently well for the last, I don't know how many 100 years. So this is where the leader sits on top of the org chart, is the smartest person in the room, has all the answers, makes all the calls him or herself, and all the information flows through him or her. So that's, in a nutshell, then leadership. And now leadership is humble leadership. Now leadership is about being self-aware enough that I know where I'm not good at, where I need to hire. The best leaders, the best humble leaders are so self-aware that they actually surround themselves with people that are smarter than them. You want smarter people on your team, and you have the humility to have other people shine on your team. You're the catalyst to bring the best out of everybody on your team. So the now leadership really is leading with radical humility.
Let's be real. Guess what's been modeled for us? All of the then leadership. It is such a hard dynamic to walk through. If I feel so called to transform into this now leadership, but all that's modeled for me has been then leadership, and what I'm currently working in my organization is used to the then leadership, the power, the authority, the everything comes top to bottom. How do we shift to now leadership?
Absolutely. So I think the first thing is actually, let's think about this. So this is sort of the intellectual part. So leadership in today's, fast-moving, complex world, let's think about it. It's actually by definition humbling. No one person can know it all or do it all. And, I just pointed out the inversion of expertise. So we actually need to rely on smarter people, subject experts in their area on our team to get the job done. So I argue that, the famous VUCA world, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, actually mandates humility, constantly learning and growing. And so that's number 2. The workforce demands it. All the studies show that the younger folks entering the workforce, they thrive on relationships. They want a lot of things. They want purpose. They want meaning in their work. And all the studies show that they actually value relationships strong relationships and meaningful relationships at work almost as much as they value money and salary.
Transformation is such a buzzword in leadership. And in episode 76, Michelle Smith talks all about transformation. She gives us a definition of what transformation is, what transformational leadership is, and how to actually get results within the organization. You really dive into a lot of transformational leadership. So I do want to dive into this topic with you, but I do want to start with the definition. Let's start like we're 5-year-olds. What is transformational leadership? And then just tell me all the things that you know about it.
So it's interesting because transformation can be the big blow it up and start over. Transformation could also be just incremental change. So it's the whole idea when I think about transformational leadership, it's this eye toward continuous improvement, right? It is not me telling you what to do and what changes you need to make. It's the approach of how we engage all levels of the organization. So that literally, and I'm going to go back to lean management system, and lean is a management system, right? And transformational leadership is key to that. So I'm going to be engaging people in the eye toward what the goal is, aligned to what strategy the organization is. But I'm also going to engage people in the problem solving so that people are solving problems where the information exists. So transformational leadership is about engaging those levels where the information is, i.e. where the work is happening. And so transformation isn't a blinder on, we're going to do this big bang thing, but it also includes the incremental improvement and how we're doing that improvement. So that leadership is saying, here's what we're going to do. Here's where we need to go. But I'm not going to prescribe for you how we're going to get there. Because we've created experiences for people. Have you heard of the results pyramid? I got exposed to it from Partners in Leadership. I don't think they're around anymore, but literally a pyramid, right? And so there's 4 levels to the pyramid. And I'm going to start at the top. So the very top level, the peak, is the results that we currently get, our current outcomes. We get those current outcomes next level down because of the actions that we take. We take those actions next level down because of beliefs that we hold. And we hold those beliefs because of experiences that we've had. So what happens a lot of times is leaders, organizations tell people we want different outcomes, do different things.
Yeah.
Okay. We're gonna make sure customers are happy, and after every encounter, we're gonna say it was my pleasure. Do different things. And then we go, okay, that's done. Whew, next.
Check the box.
But what happens is people are going to do it while you're watching. But as soon as you turn your back to go to the next thing, which a lot of times for organizations, they don't give any integration time. They just, boom, the next thing's calendar because this thing's done, right? This campaign's done. We got the next one coming up. But when you turn away, then people go back to the old way, unless someone's belief is aligned with what you're doing. But the majority of humans, we have to dig down lower. And so I call this root cause analysis for people. But we need to actually understand the beliefs that people are holding.
Okay. In episode 77, I just go on a rant about how we are making our life and work too complicated and too complex. I just go off. I'm so tired of this complexity. We're doing stupid stuff out there. But my point is that by pursuing more, we're actually having less. And then I call out the major offenders that are making our work too complex. So listen to these offenders and then work to avoid them. Stop making it complex. Kiss it. Keep it simple, stupid. Are too much, too long, too cumbersome way of working and living just isn't working for us anymore. So let's just think about this. We have more and more of everything we could ever want, everything that we could ever need access to. And yet we're less productive and less content than we've ever been. Do you feel that way? Do you feel like you're always going, and never get to take a moment of rest, that there's always a ton of work to be done? I mean, let's just think about society in general, right? Think about it. People have access to so many things these days, but we're not any better. We have access to more information, yet we're not really becoming wiser. We have access to more options, but we're becoming paralyzed by all the possibilities. And we have access to more automation to our work, and yet we're still working longer hours than ever. That doesn't make sense. Are too many options, Our long, drawn out processes, our overly complex systems just aren't working. And that's because complexity kills action and busyness robs us of joy. When the path forward isn't clear and simple, we check out. I know I do. When a constant feeling of inadequacy is present, that internal peace that we strive for is absent. But there's some common things that stop that flow. And if you've ever worked anywhere, this is going to sound so familiar, y'all. So let's break it down. Have you ever heard or experienced too many steps in a process? It takes like 50 steps to complete this one thing. Y'all, too many steps in a process is like a pebble in your shoe. Not only does it slow you down, it is painful. Now, another thing that can slow down the work is too much possessiveness. Think of a basketball player who refuses to pass the ball. Y'all, teams win, not individual players. We have to work together. Another obstacle is too little clarity on the goal. It's like getting a box of materials without any idea of what you're supposed to build. And another one is having too many choices. Have you ever been in the cereal aisle at the grocery store? Yeah, there's too many options. You can literally have analysis paralysis of just like, I don't know which one to choose. There's so many possibilities. Another one is having too few decision makers. This is a classic bureaucracy. No one wants to make the call because no one wants to get pinned or blamed later for it. They don't want to take ownership of it, and therefore nothing moves forward. Oh, that happens so often. Now, here's where the real frustration kicks in. People are working hard. They're probably even pulling longer hours, but at the end of the day, they feel like they haven't made any real progress. And why do you think that is? It's because the day-to-day tasks that they're doing are complex, they're disconnected, and they're definitely not streamlined. In episode 78, Eric Pfeiffer is all about helping us thrive as a leader under pressure. And he reminds us that, y'all, this basic truth, the world doesn't change. Instead, we change how we engage with it. And because of that, we know that we have to recognize that we have influence and impact, but we do not have control.
I can go back to the season of my life when I was so frustrated by so many different, I was a young husband, a young father, a young business leader, trying to navigate so much complexity and just always overwhelmed, always frustrated, feeling like, man, if the world would just do what I want it to do, then everything would be okay. And, I'm waiting on the world to change, as John Mayer says in one of his songs.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was actually a mentor who helped me to wake up to the fact that, like, hey, buddy, you're going to be waiting the rest of your life for the world to conform to your expectations. And so if you're going to make yourself hostage, if you're going to make your sense of a peace, identity, acceptance, approval, significance, purpose, all these things that we're desperately looking for, if you're going to make the world responsible for the things that are most important to who you are as a human being, then you've imprisoned yourself. And here's the worst part. You're sitting in prison and the key's in your pocket. And I remember that was so powerful for me. And that was the season of my life where I began to wake up to this whole idea that, like, hey, the only thing I can be in control of is my attitudes, my behaviors, and how I respond and engage the world, but not the way the world is behaving toward me. And that literally was a form of freedom. I tell people business is hard, but let's back up even a little bit further. Life is hard. And so when we're talking about developing as leaders and learning how to overcome all of the unique challenges that we're facing in the workplace, thankfully, I discovered this many years ago. It's the same skills and practices that we need to be able to overcome those same things in every area of our life. As people, we are constantly facing situations where we're under pressure. Things aren't going our way. Life rarely unfolds the way we expect or want it to. We're constantly getting thrown curveballs. And I tell people, well, welcome to humanity. Welcome to life. Life is hard because not everything unfolds according to our expectations. I think that's a big part for us as human beings, let alone as leaders, people who have influence and impact in any environment. It always begins from the position of accepting the fact that we live in a world that we cannot control.
Oh, that's
We
so good.
we have so much influence and impact, but we don't have control over the world.
Mm.
It took me years to realize I can't control them. I have influence, I have impact. I don't have control over them, but I do have control over one thing, and that is my attitudes and my behaviors. The way that I interpret, understand the world, and respond to the world is actually my superpower.
I'm back for a monologue in episode 79 to share the power of the mindset of gratitude and how it has absolutely changed my life in leadership. I compare the mindset of gratitude to like a pair of glasses, a pair of lenses that we wear, and I share my experience of how it's absolutely changed my life. The result is having a mindset of gratitude has changed everything about the way that I view situations now. I have so much more peace and joy and love. I laugh way the heck more. It's so much better. And so how do we change those lenses from selfishness to gratitude? Um, I think one thing that it took for me going through is realizing the epiphany, the aha, I'm wearing selfish lenses. A lot of times we don't even recognize what bad habits we have. And it takes that revelation or that conviction of saying, ooh, I'm currently doing something repetitively that is not a good thing. It's definitely not an image bearing person of Christ that that I have as I am wearing this, negative lens and selfish lens and things like that. And it just makes me think about that plank and log, or log and spec, however you want to say it. Um, that's the mantra that I use. And I just encourage you as you go through life and experiences, find something biblical that can help you capture those thoughts. And my mindset has really changed from all the situations where I used to say, I have to. I have to take the kids to do this. I have to cook dinner. I have to do laundry. That's the home example. I have to go to this meeting. I have to de-escalate this situation. I have to do this presentation. I have to do this report. Have to, have to, have to, have to. I have to serve at church. All of these complaints from the mindset of I have to. Through changing my mindset to gratitude and thanksgiving, it truly is now from a place of I get to go serve. I get to help people make sense of some crazy numbers. I get to serve my family through food on the table. I get to. It has changed my world. It has completely rocked my world. Instead of I have to. Let's talk about the holidays. I have to go to my parents. I have to be here on this day and here on this day and here on this day. And we can only eat lunch for 3 hours at this place. Then we got to drive somewhere else and eat dinner at this place. I have to. I have to. Now I get to spend time with my family here. And I get to spend time with my family here. Way different. In our last episode of season 3, episode 80, Dustin, George, and I have a great conversation about how to persevere through difficult seasons in life and leadership. We talk about our insecurities and we share how leadership has made me walk with a limp, but it made him smell like smoke. It's hilarious. Give it a listen. In other words, I like to say that everyone goes through these difficulties, but when you're in leadership, it's almost like it's magnified because everybody gets to see you go through it and the fallout of if you don't go through it well. Maybe it's just me, but it feels like even beyond just our normal day lives, it feels like a heaviness in the air where we're all walking around with just like this extra weight and we can't even name it all the time. So can you help us understand these hardships, these seasons that we tend to go through?
Sure. And as leaders, one of the things that I like to say is that leadership amplifies insecurity.
That's
And
good.
it's almost like I draw an analogy between that and the idea of, say, a leak in your roof. You don't, or a leak maybe in a boat. If it's not in the water, there's not that pressure, you don't realize it, you don't see it. But when the storms come and the pressure rises, then any sort of weakness gets exposed. And any sort of insecurity that you might have, that you might wrestle with. And we all wrestle with different things. But any degree of insecurity that you might have, leadership amplifies that. It doesn't actually necessarily make it bigger, but it does reveal it more clearly.
So it's
Sure.
important for us leaders to walk with that limp. You don't want to trust a leader that doesn't walk with a limp. They haven't been through hardship.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But I love your, analogy that it's so true. It is such fertile soil to grow closer to God, to grow those character lessons, faith, all of those things. But if we're not careful, we can plant bitterness, angerness, and forgiveness. And it's the same with leadership. When you go through those hardships, it may not be trauma level, but it's hard. What are you planting there? Ooh, preach.
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned that about how that impacts our leadership. Because I mean, I would go as far as to say this: you probably will have a harder time following a leader who has not been through those fires. That can be very dangerous. And you're going to go through fires of leadership. That will happen. But if you've never learned to navigate those fiery seasons outside of leadership, and then you are trying to work those things out as a leader for the first time, that can be a very dangerous place. I remember I joined the staff of a church. The pastor, he said, you have something that a lot of us on this staff, we don't have. He said, you smell like smoke. And then I was thinking, do I physically smell like smoke? And he said, no, you've been fire hardened. And he said, but you smell like smoke. And he said, because you've been through some fires of leadership that we haven't. And that comes at a price, but it does enable you to face things with maybe a different perspective. And God does not waste that. And I think that's one thing that I have learned, even in the midst of a very difficult season, whatever that season may be, to be able to say, okay, God being sovereign, God's going to use this if I will allow him to.
Yeah.
And if I don't turn bitter and I don't dwell on the pain, I don't keep poking and prodding and picking at it. But God can use that to grow me in a way that otherwise I would not grow.
Wow. What a ride this season has been. Yeah, we've heard from leaders who faced challenges, made bold moves, and come out on the other side stronger and wiser. And they have been so kind to share their wisdom and experiences with us. If this season taught us anything, it's that leadership isn't about having all the answers. It's about being willing to grow, adapt, and lead with courage. I remember as the great Eleanor Roosevelt, I love her. She was the first lady to FDR. She once said, learn from the mistakes of others. You can't live long enough to make them all yourself. I love that. I tell my kids, wisdom is not just learning from your own mistakes and your own experiences. It's learning from other people as well. So let's be honest. You're probably still going to make a few of those mistakes, and that's okay. Actually, I can guarantee you're going to. Because leadership is not about perfection. It's about persistence and about progress. And that's what the Leadership on the Rocks podcast is all about. It's about having a place to come and learn from the experience, the wisdom, the what to do, and the poor decisions, what not to do from other leaders. And so as we wrap up season 3, I want to leave you with this. Leadership isn't something you achieve. It's something you live. You live it in your home. You live it at your place of work. You live it with your extended family, your immediate family. You live it within yourself. You have to lead yourself well. So keep learning, keep leading, and keep building your life and your leadership on the essential rocks. And hey, don't forget to laugh along the way. Let's be honest, there's plenty of opportunities. Learn to laugh at yourself, even whenever you have sand in your crack and in your shoes. Thank you for an amazing season 3 on Leadership on the Rocks. And I will see you next year, leaders. Let's keep raising the bar and maybe a glass together. Until next time, continue putting in the work of building your life and leadership on the rocks, the essential rocks. God bless. Remember, the most essential rock you can build your life and leadership on is the rock of Jesus Christ. Today's Bible verse comes from Matthew chapter 7, verses 24 and 25. Everyone then who hears these words of mine and does them will be like a wise man who built his house on the rock. And the rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat that house. But it did not fall, because it had been founded on the rock.